Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Erika Robinson from In the Company of the Cards. And Erika and I both participated in a panel for lunatic astrology a couple weeks ago. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to welcome her on my channel and to talk about something that we sort of grazed the surface of during the panel. Erika had asked a question about the wound of race, specifically in the United States, and how the transits look for that in the future. And specifically, when I think about that, I think about all of the transits that are going to be happening in 2025, all of these outer planet ingresses into the next sign and how that's going to play out. So, before we get started, I wanted to introduce Erika and have her tell us a little bit about the Lenormand deck.
Yes, delighted to be here with you. I loved our time together on the panel. Uh, and so, a little bit about Lenormand. So, Lenormand is a European divination system that traditionally is comprised of 36 cards. And there are pictures on the cards that are familiar, archetypal. Everyone will recognize them, like a house, a dog, a tree, etc. And so when you read these cards, you're essentially reading the way that you learned how to read when you were a kid. You're stringing together words to make meaning, right? So that's essentially what I did. I wrote the book, The Language of Lenormand. If anyone is interested in learning how to work this with the system, it is very there are similarities, but there are big differences with tarot. So tarot is very imagistic. Lenormand, not so much. Lenormand, you could do a Lenormand reading if you had 36 index cards and you just wrote the word tree, house, dog, etc. But they are a way of having a dialogue with what? So I call it spirit. That's what I call it. Um, I always say that we human beings live in, understand time according to the clock, the watch, the calendar, and the Greeks called that chronos. So we all understand that. But there's another kind of time called kairos, Kairos, the fullness of time. And it includes chronos, but it is more than chronos because it's the past and the future as well as the present. So when I use the cards, it helps me access the information in those other places, most specifically, of course, the future, really, so that we can get some guidance in how to move forward. And if people see a trajectory that they like, that's great. If they see a trajectory they don't like, it gives you an opportunity to look at it hard and then to make some changes because we are astrology is such an interesting field because the idea is there are certain things astrologically in the stars that make us who we are and make life what it is. Um, and Lenormand would add to that we have aegis and authority and autonomy as well. And so when you put those two things together, I mean, the world and one's life can be really enriched.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting relationship between any kind of divination card and astrology because a lot of the tarot deck is directly related to certain transits and placements. Whereas, I mean, I read a little bit about Lenormand, but it seems more like psychological and symbolic. Um,
I
in
think that's true. I think that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just curious, did you have experience reading from like the Rider Waite deck prior to starting with Lenormand or any other tarot cards, or did you start
Yes.
with?
So like everybody, I started with tarot. Yes. And became, I mean, I do read, I can read tarot. I like tarot. I think it's beautiful. But then I came upon the Lenormand system, and this was years and years ago. There was nothing, there was one resource in English written on it, and there were French resources. I read those. There were German resources. I couldn't read those. But I devoured that one source in English, and then I realized that from there I was just going to have to practice, practice, practice. So I went online And I had a full time job, and I would come home from my full time job and, make some coffee and then read for people around the world well into the night. And so they would ask me things like let's say I got someone from India. I know nothing about them, just maybe their name. And they would say, "What does he think about her?" And what I learned through doing these readings is, my ego wants to ask, well, who's him and who's her? What's the context? Is this a love thing? Is it a parent child? Is it a boss employee? That's my ego. But I don't use my ego when I read the cards. They're not asking my opinion, they're asking me the universe's opinion, right? So I would just pull the cards and then I would type out a text of, the answer. And I mean, it got to the point where I would come home and I would say, okay, I'm going to do 10 readings. And 1,000 people would ask for readings. So it just bloomed, just got bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where I got asked if I wanted to read in a place, a local shop where I was living on the East Coast at the time. And I worked there, and that was great because then it was, not sort of somebody on the internet, but it was in person, and that was terrific. And then I was approached by Wiser Books, and they said, "Would you write a book?" Like, okay. And I was a teacher for 30 years, an English teacher. And I think that Lenormand is a word language. So I just used a scaffolding approach to teach people little by little how to read. You're reading from the first chapter, the cards, and then you just build on your knowledge. And it's a beautiful thing. I got into it around the time that I was widowed, which was 16 years ago now. And I Lenormand became for me that 3 a.m. phone friend. People always say, "Oh, call me anytime, come over anytime." They don't really mean that. And people have lives, and I think widows are uncomfortable people to be around because it just reminds you the way of all flesh, the path we're all going to walk, right? So I would go to Lenormand, and what I discovered was that I could ask the same question over and over, and it would just very patiently give me the same answer, but using different combinations of cards. So saying the answer in different words, and I found that a great comfort. Um, and that's how I began to use it for other people. I thought, well, if this is such a friend to me, maybe it could be a friend to other people. And my goal has always been to have as many people as there are in the world have a Lenormand deck or make their own with just index cards and the word on it. Because I think too often people don't realize that they don't need intermediaries to access their higher self's own wisdom, right? And so this system is easy relative to tarot. There's much less symbolism involved in it. So it's easier to learn. The thing is, because it's a word language, you can read, the way some of us were taught to read see spot run and stop there. And then you think that Lenormand is sort of basic. I've had people say, "Oh, Lenormand's a basic bitch compared to tarot." Or they'll say things like, "Oh, Lenormand, is that tarot's little sister?" And I'm like, okay. But that just means that they have a basic understanding of it. But you can use the same 26 letters in an alphabet to say see spot run as you can. It's the same 26 letters that Shakespeare used or Toni Morrison used, right? So it's a real partnership between the cards and you as the reader, and it can be as sophisticated as you are as a reader, as erudite as you are as a reader, or as simple as you are as a reader. It's not simplistic, but it's very simple.
Yeah, I find that really interesting because, well, for so many things that you just said, um, I was smiling when you were talking about the ego because it is difficult to kind of separate yourself when you're reading. And, this Rider Waite deck has more cards than a Lenormand. However, when I've used other divinatory or divination techniques, sometimes I find that the fewer symbols that are involved, for instance, like with astrology, there's so many cards in this deck that represent different things that could be an astrological aspect. But when you just look at the sun and Mercury, you can almost get more information from that
Right.
with fewer symbols. I don't know if that
No,
makes much sense,
that
but
makes sense. I mean, somebody well, one of the things I think is interesting, so I have a YouTube channel as well, and it's in the company of cards. And I've been surprised at how it has just exploded. I only did it put it up 2.5 months ago. And I mean, I've got thousands of viewers. Now, what's that about? I think it's because I read on politics and culture and society, and I show people how I pull the cards. And I mean, they see that these images are archetypal and familiar and easy to understand what they are. And I think it draws people because it's so simple. I've had people say, "Oh, can you do a grand tableau spread on whatever the election, let's say?" Now, grand tableau is a spread that uses all 36 cards. But the problem with it is it's what you're saying about astrology. It tells you a little bit about a lot of things. But sometimes, in fact, most of the time, when people come to astrologers or to people like me, they don't want to know a little bit about a lot of things. They have maybe one or two deep questions that they want to ask, right? So instead, I said I will not do the grand tableau on my channel, but I will do my 23 card spread, which is a deep dive into a single issue, which makes the case that you're making. If you see a particular, I mean, I can't even use your language because I'm not an astrologer, but if you zone in on a particular, whatever it is, placement, transit, whatever, um, you can get deeper as opposed to taking sort of the panoramic wide angled view, which again tells you a lot about a little about a lot of things, and it's kind of impressive and show offy, but really in order to get the depth, um, sometimes less is more.
yeah, I totally agree. And that is exactly what we are going to be doing today with talking about these transits is first introducing the transit, and then Erica is going to pull some cards on it. But I totally agree that, sometimes people want a very detailed explanation of something. And especially I do live streams sometimes where I will do live readings. Sometimes all I need is one card.
Right.
And I
Well,
can say,
right.
this person is, they're doing stuff behind your back. Maybe
Absolutely.
you can't trust them, things like that. That's it's like the message comes through so clearly with one card.
Absolutely. One card. That tarot is different from Lenormand in that way because it you can get so much in a single card. With Lenormand, I call Lenormand a group sport, a team sport, a group activity. You need, I would say, three cards in order to be able to really tell somebody something because it's like a word. A word is just a word until you add more words to it. And that's what makes that original word pop off the page, right? You know, I always give the example of a dog. So one of the cards in Lenormand is a dog. If I say dog, you get a certain image in your head, of something with four legs, a tail, a snout, whatever. But if I
Little
say to you, if I say to you, the the little white dog wagged its whole back end. It was so excited to see me, and it licked me like I was an ice cream cone. You get an image, right? But if I take the same word, dog, and I say the big brown dog leapt at my throat with its fangs dripping saliva. Well, whoa, you see how the word dog comes alive, but in two very different ways. That's how Lenormand works. A dog is just a dog until you add some other cards with it, and then it pops and comes alive.
Yes, and this is so like getting chills right now because it's just so when I ever I talk to anyone about astrology or tarot or divination as a whole, I always say everything is everything. And like, what you do with Lenormand there are so many ties like that with astrology. Everything is in context. And the same thing with tarot. It's different with, the number of cards or the way the cards are interpreted,
Right?
but everything is everything.
Everything is everything. That's right.
So let's jump into it with these transits that are happening in 2025 and pull some cards for this. I'm getting excited.
Me too.
So The overall themes in 2025, and this is going to be the first of many videos that I do on this transit because there are so many topics to cover. And today we're going to be covering mostly social issues. Maybe some other things will come up. With the cards, you never really know, what is going to show up. But these transits are very much power to the people. And that does not come without turbulence. 2025 is going to be a pretty turbulent year. And I would say, these transits, they're not a pinpoint. It is a process. It is going to unfold over a long period of time, especially the Pluto transit is going to be, I believe, 21 years. So, in the very beginning, there is always a shift. There is a paradigm shift that, whenever a big transit happens, I open my phone, I have 20 texts from people, clients or friends saying, "What happened?" And I anticipate that to happen a lot in 2025. Um, and this was foreshadowed a little bit in 2020 when we saw the ingress of both Saturn and Jupiter, and their conjunction happened in Aquarius. Pluto is going to be moving into Aquarius. Pluto is the slowest moving, planet around the solar system. And so it really has this undercurrent energy of where society is. And it stays in a sign for about 20 years. But the first planet we're going to talk about today, we're going to go from uh, the inside to the outside. And we're going to be talking about Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And a little bit about Saturn too, because Saturn is traveling along with Neptune. So we're going to be starting with Uranus's ingress into Gemini. And the last time that this happened was in 1941 when the United States entered World War II.
Mhm.
Um, so there was a lot that happened during this time. I'm just looking at my notes here. And the symbolism of Uranus is the great disruptor. It challenges the status quo. It is in ancient astrology, it is the god of the sky. And Gemini is our intellect, our communication, our transportation, and our media. I have a lot of predictions to make about this transit into Gemini. One being that media as we know it is going to completely change. I don't know if social media is going to shift or it's going to turn into something completely different so that we can connect in ways with each other that we haven't been able to do yet. And part of what I believe is going to be in the mix with that is the idea of censorship. I think that
Mhm.
Uranus is really going to just break down the blockades of censorship, for better or worse, because there is a lot of censorship on social media right now. And, some of that censorship is good. Some of that censorship is quieting oppressed voices of people and skewing the media. There is a lot of propaganda. Um, I don't want to get too partisan on this, but, specifically with what is happening in the Middle East right now, many voices are being silenced.
Mhm.
So obviously, the main transit that people think of with Uranus and Gemini is World War II. I don't want to focus so heavily on that because I think that this transit is going to unfold in a very different way than it did in 1941. If we look back at some events that happened during this transit, this was when women were entering the workforce during World War II because so many men were shipped overseas. And there was a huge surge in unionization in the United States because of the wartime production. And because of that, at the same time, the Fair Employment Practice Committee was established, which prohibited discrimination, specifically in the defense industry in the workplace. So there was a lot of progressive movement in the workplace with this transit. There was also a lot of innovation in communication. The first commercial television station, NBC, was put on air. And there were huge innovations in technology. Gemini is also related to technology. And there are going to be several things that are happening in the chart that have to do with technology. But the Uranus ingress into Gemini is one of them. Also, at this time, I think it's interesting to mention that the development of the first electronic numeric integrator and computer started in 1941. And what are we seeing now? We're seeing AI. And
Right.
AI is definitely a very Gemini topic. So, and also obviously the development of nuclear technology. That was the one thing that was associated with the wartime effort, the biggest thing. So, given these themes that we see kind of coming to the surface right now, that we sort of project as being big players in 2025, AI, which hopefully means less work for people who for working class people, work being automated and hopefully possible UBI, universal basic income, unionization, very much tied to that AI revolution, cryptography and blockchain, which I think are going to be big subjects in the near future, especially with development of the new BRICS payment system, and breakthroughs in managing the supply chain and overall making that more efficient. Gemini is also very closely related to the supply chain. Mercury is the ruler of Gemini.
Mhm.
So, with all of these changes, I know that that is a very wide array of topics, but I was hoping that you could pull some cards for this
Yeah.
transit and let
So,
me know.
okay. The first thing that I think I'd like to look at is the censorship question. In Lenormand, there. Well, you're too young to remember this, but American Express used to have a commercial, and the tagline was, whatever you want in the world, whatever you want to buy, there's a card for that, and they'd hold up the American Express card. Well, in Lenormand, whatever we discuss, there's a card for that. So I'm going to say that for censorship, the card that I think we will use as a focus card is the book. Now, you and I know that books hold information, but the Lenormand book is different. The Lenormand book is the card for things that are being hidden, things that are being withheld, information that we cannot access. So I'm going to charge it, and that just means intend. I'm just going to intend that that card for this purpose will stand for the trajectory during 2025 of censorship. What will it look like? So I'm gonna just I cut the deck into three, and this is my own deck, uh, and I'm gonna look for the book. There it is, popped right up. So we have the book, the moon, the bear, the older man, and the dog. Okay, so and what I think I want to do is pull. Uh, yeah, okay. So the cards are the bear, the moon, the book, the older man, and the dog. And remember that the topic that we're discussing is censorship. So the bear. There will absolutely be an attempt at greater censorship. There's no question. A bear is, I mean, if you met a bear in the forest and there was a pizza and you both wanted it, I'm pretty sure the bear would get it. Bears get what they want, or they try to. It's also the card for the narcissist. And I am thinking of you know, particular billionaires who have control over a lot of things and could conceivably have control over more. And so that's this card. The second card is the moon. Now, what's that about? The moon is the card for identity and reputation. Obviously, why would someone want there to be more censorship? So that they can control how people perceive whatever it is that they want them to be looking at, whether it's themselves or whatever they've got cooking up. They want to be able to control the narrative. Okay, so then we have the book in the middle. This is censorship. Here's what's interesting. We have this old man card, and I feel like the energy of this is just the old way of doing things. You know, top down, um, uh, patriarchal, authoritarian in terms of what people should and shouldn't know. But it's followed by the dog, and I like the dog. Um, what will happen is that there will be, I'm thinking of um, Elon,
Mhm.
who will want us to think this is a great thing, what I'm doing. Um, he's against censorship until he's for censorship, actually. So, you know what I mean? I mean, he has a particular narrative, right? And so here's him saying, I'm your buddy, I'm your pal, I'm your friend. This is going to make your life easier, faster, smoother, um, all of that. But I mean, is it really? I drew a couple of clarifiers. One is, again, the old way of doing things, um, but it's followed by the snake, which I think is a good thing. Snake is a problem. The old is passing away, especially with this Pluto now in Aquarius. And that's about the only transit I know because we've been hearing about it since my childhood. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Finally, so this is a problem for the old order, and I think that with the dog, I pulled a clarifier and I see the ship. Now the ship is forward movement. Um, this is going to be a big, big issue because, again, one person's censorship is another person's latitude, freedom. Um, and I think things are not always what they appear to be. We've got this bear, and I can mirror it with this last card, this ship. I think Musk is going to, try really hard to change the whole landscape of the way we do media, for example. Murdoch as well, but Murdoch is the old guy who's passing away. So I don't think it'll work for him. I want to draw a clarifier on this book. Yeah. So the clarifier for the book and the book, this is censorship. Things improve. The Stork is always about positive change. I mean, I'm a child of the olden days when there were like, I don't know, 11 channels, and the three big ones were ABC, CBS, and NBC. Everybody got the same news. Didn't matter which of those three channels that you went to, and all of those newscasters you felt were reliable and honest brokers and just giving you the news. Well, the news is not that way anymore. I mean, you've got citizen journalists, you've got cable news, you've got a lot of people getting news from TikTok, etc. Uh, so I think that censorship will be a hard thing to crack down on because I don't think it's compatible with new technology. It's just not, you know. Um, any questions on that?
Not a question necessarily, but, I think it's interesting, as we are approaching the TikTok ban, and TikTok is I mean, depending on what you're talking about, is the platform with I don't wanna say the most freedom of speech, but it has, the algorithm that is not going to suppress certain points of view.
Mhm,
And so
mhm,
when, the ban is set to go through,
yeah,
I don't know what the current status of because I know that TikTok had, filed an appeal, and a lawsuit. And also, the question is, like, how are they going to be able to ban it? If people already have it on their phone, all of these different questions. But
mhm.
that makes me wonder if there's going to be some sort of acquisition, if Elon Musk is going to, come out with a new TikTok feature or something, and how is that going to play out?
Yeah,
I mean, this is all just postulation,
mhm.
because there will be a gap in the market if TikTok does successfully get
Yeah,
banned.
let me pull 5 cards on that. Will there be a pop-up, um, um, substitute, we'll call it, for TikTok? Okay. So I'm just gonna pull 5. Wow. Okay, so, you know, I shuffled these cards, but we have some of the same ones. There's the I'll hold them up so people can see. There's the moon, there's the man, there's the snake right in the middle, the lily, and then young women. Now, what a smooth ending to a kind of a line that starts out hard. Uh, because with this in the middle, yeah, I think there probably will be a TikTok ban. Of course, the argument against TikTok is that it's a Chinese company, and what are they doing with everybody's information that they've now accessed? That's the argument. That's the problem. So, yeah, would the solution be that someone else comes in? Could well be, because we have the Lily here. People are going to freak out when they lose this platform, but they will be calmed down because another platform will take its place. And then this card is, not a person, but it's yin energy, meaning that whatever takes the place of TikTok will have to be perceived by the powers that be, as um, more benign, a more benign actor than whatever that guy's name is, who runs TikTok in China.
Yeah,
Um,
I can't think of his name either, but
yeah, I had it in my head and then it slipped.
I think
But
fraction.
I mean, the thing is that I have my own theories about Musk and what is going to happen to him. I see Harris as winning the election, and Harris will have her own Justice Department, of which Merrick Garland will not be the head. And I think that Elon is playing very fast and loose, and Elon may not be the one who does this, especially if the energy is like this,
Yeah. Yeah, this
right?
does not, speak to the
Not
energy
Elon.
that is on Twitter right now.
No. Now, by the way, that's not to say that this would not be perhaps a front person for him, because he's the one with the billions, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and, just I mean, purely from I try to look at things through the lens of, um, whatever media platform that comes out, it is going to be marketed to us,
that's right.
and so, it would be of benefit to whoever wants to do this to present it as a more yin and feminine
Yeah,
energy, because that is
yeah,
what is marketable right now, whether you want to believe that capitalism has our best interests in mind or if it's just trying to sell us something.
right, right. Well, I mean, I think capitalism is reading the room.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there is a rise in the yin and the feminine, and across the board. And so you can fight it. And obviously, there are plenty of people who are fighting against it. We'll see how that works out in the election, for example. But I think that capitalism is smart enough to know when they can't fight City Hall, and when it's best to go along to get along with that soft sell. But just because it appears to be a soft sell, it's still a sell.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, they're always what they appear. Um,
I'm
you had another thing. Uh, oh, wait, it was technological in nature. What was that? Um,
Well, there were 2 things, I had brought up, blockchain and AI, but also,
right.
the thing that I'm, very interested in is I mean, that and also unionization,
Yeah.
because there was a huge push. Yeah, and I
Okay.
think that the 2 are going to be hand in hand,
Mhm.
because one
So
is going to force the other to
for
happen.
unionization in 2025, the card that I'm going to look for is birds, because birds is a card for, you know, uh, groups talking, meeting, planning, that kind of thing. So it's the perfect card for a union. All right, so let's see what we get. I'm just going to pull 5 cards, and if I have to do more clarifiers, I will. Okay, so what does unionization look like in 2025? Which will also, by the way, tell us something about which way the election is going to go, because depending on the election, unionization would go one way or another.
Yes.
To put it, you know.
And this video, this video will come out before the election
The
results.
election.
We
Okay,
are
so
all on the edge of our seats.
we are. So this is the card for unionization. Okay. Okay, interesting. So the cards that I got are the lily, the book again. There's our unionization, the letter, and the mice. Now, you know, no matter which side wins the election, the big players in tech and everything else are not fans of unionization, obviously. So, the lily, we would love to have this um, Pluto and Aquarius kumbaya moment of peace around this. And of course, people should unionize. And of course, working conditions should be, fair, et cetera, et cetera. But it's followed by the book. We'd like to think things are going to improve, but we don't know. And I'll pull a card on that in a minute. So the center card is the birds. The votes, this is votes. This is the card for votes. But then it's followed by the mice. I don't love mice here. Mice is a card that eats away at the card before. It detracts from. It's the card that, in some ways, is the opposite of the first card because it's the card for anxiety, worry, stress. So it eats away at everything that is not that, which is ease, kumbaya, can't we all get along? And I think that the energy of this is will lend itself to something that you talked about in the beginning of the conversation, which is sort of the turbulence that will be around, and I'm going to call it the potential for a soft, and maybe soft is the wrong word, civil war. Uh, right? So there will be parts of the country, for example, where unionization will be definitely less welcome than other parts of the country. And then there's going to be all kinds of fighting about that. So I think that the unionization issue is going to be contentious. I'm going to pull a clarifier right on the, yeah. Okay, I pulled a card on the birds. This is unionization, but the clarifier is the cross. I think there will be increasing efforts to get rid of it, to harm unions, to hurt unions. And who's going to do this? Well, these big companies that own these big entities, Amazon comes to mind, Starbucks comes to mind. Um, there will be efforts to this is a card of pain for who? People who are in favor of unions. So I just think it's going to be an issue that lends itself to this angsty zeitgeist that could conceivably march us towards something worse.
Yes, and that is something that we talked very briefly about. S.J. Anderson in the previous video, the panel that we were on, talked
Mhm.
about, he said, a resonance of civil war. And
Yeah.
this is something that a lot of astrologers are very careful to talk about,
Mhm.
um, which actually, when we talk about the next transit in a moment, that is what happened the last time that Neptune was in Aries. And so there's many things pointing in the direction of division. And I
Right.
also think that people think of civil war and they think of those really bloody battles that happened. And war looks very different now than
That's
it
right.
did hundreds of years ago. And also a civil war, what is that going to look like in the United States? It's going to look, I don't want to say it's going to look, but it would look very different from, I think, how what people are expecting.
That's right.
One of the unfortunate things that I do predict, especially specifically relating to this transit of Uranus in Gemini. Uranus is the great disruptor. When Uranus
Mhm.
makes certain transits, It can be, it denotes earthquakes. It denotes, for instance, the first assassination attempt on Donald Trump was
Yeah.
when Uranus and Mars were conjunct his midheaven. And so, it's these moments of just kind of gunshots or explosions or whatever.
Right.
And I think this ingress of Uranus into Gemini could possibly denote a rise in domestic terrorism, which, to be
Well,
fair, we
yes,
have been
and
seeing.
what a lot of us readers, card readers, have also talked about is, um, you're right. I mean, it's not going to look like you like I'll shoot you and then you shoot me and then I'll shoot you, and that's the old style. That's not how these kinds of wars will be fought. But there's a lot of speculation. Speaking of these big oligarchs, both domestic oligarchs and foreign oligarchs, is that um, money will not be poured into politicians the way that it has been the last several election cycles, but will instead be funneled to groups like the Proud Boys, for example. These are, so these are groups that are well known, but there are many that are not well known, but they are, underground, radicalized groups, and that they will be the ones who use that money to do civil war. And what would civil war look like? Well, I don't know, bombing a subway, right? Bombing a supermarket, and that there are foreign interests who would love to just sit back and watch this happen and see where we go from there. People are all excited at the prospect of having a black woman president. I will say that. I think that every magical person should do what they can to help put a cone of protection around her, because I know that this time is also resonant of not just the 40s, but of the 68 as well. And 68, I remember it well, was a time of martyrs, a time of martyrs. And nobody wants to be a martyr, but people are martyred. And so I think it's going to be very turbulent. It will not be. I hope we learned our lesson when Obama became president and everybody wanted to claim that we were now living in a post-racial society. No, not really. In fact, his election is what sparked every ugly thing that we see now, right? So imagine a woman who's also of color. um, you talked in the very beginning about the status quo being upended. Well, nobody likes being upended, and I always liken it to a rat that's cornered in a kitchen, and you've got the broom and you're going to poke it. Well, that's when it's in its most dangerous. That's when its fangs will be bared and its claw, whatever that. I don't know. I mean, maybe you've seen it in a movie or something, but that's when things are their most dangerous. And so the trick is to not retreat and say, okay, well, I'm scared of your fangs, so we'll do this another day. But to say no, this is we are now at the apex of this, right? And
Yeah.
you cannot get to the other side without addressing the apex of things. And if someone of my age, I tell myself I may not live to see the other side of it. Um, but there will be another side of it. I just think we have to be realistic about what we have to go through between now and then.
Yeah, and although I do see, like, a lot of these transits do denote progress,
Hmm.
and, I also, I stick by my prediction that Kamala Harris will win the election, but like you said, that kind of brings people out of the woodwork, and that leads to this turbulence. It's
Yeah,
not just like everything's fixed and
no,
wonderful. After Obama's presidency, Trump was elected.
that's
That was
right.
a reaction
A
to.
direct response to that. That's right.
Yes. I completely agree, and I think that it is going to be a long process. I don't know if this will ever be squashed. This idea, this old way of thinking.
Well,
Um,
I think that this difficult time presents us with such a wonderful opportunity to examine who we are as a country and to decide who it is we want to be. I think the jury's out. I think that we have sold ourselves and the world a great idea about who we are. American exceptionalism, land of the free, home of the brave, all that. But the reality is quite different. And, the Constitution talks about a more perfect union. Do we want a more perfect union? That's the question that all these transits present to us on a platter as a gift. Is this who do you want to be? You get to decide who it is you want to be. And I think the jury's out on that.
Yes, and I also think that it brings up a great point of, the United States has been going through its Pluto return, and I do think that, with all of these shifts, people are asking, will the Constitution, will everything continue the way that it is? Are we going to see big changes, specifically in the way that we are governed?
Well, one of the thing
Will
yeah, I mean, I think that, one of the questions that I get asked on my YouTube is whether we will continue to have a two-party system,
Mhm.
right? Because, I mean, but we have had in the past, we've always had other parties, but it's not been like France is or like, Norway, where they have many parties, and so you might think that that's chaotic, and it kind of is chaotic. But the benefit of it is that they have to reach consensus in order to govern. So I think that that's a good question to look at. Will we change? I mean, I think we know on the face of it that we will change and to more than a two-party system. Again, we've always had, the Green Party, the Communist Party, but I mean, everybody knows. I mean, they're not going to win anything. But when you've got, for example, you've got the Democratic Party, you've got the MAGA people, and then you've got someone like Liz Cheney, whose goal, I think, is to recreate another party. That would be a bona fide, legitimate party that everyone who's not MAGA would consider joining because they're not going to want to stay with the Democrats. That's just for this election. You know, I think a good question is, would it benefit us to go the way of France and of Norway by having a bunch of legitimate um, parties who will be at the table. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's definitely also, part of the symbology here in astrology as well.
Mhm.
Uranus into Gemini, the great disruptor, into our intellect, and then Neptune into Aries, expanding our ideology with new ideas. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. So all of this is kind of, lining up. And these are long transits. It might not happen in 4 years.
Right,
Sorry, I don't know if you can hear my dog.
right.
Um, but it's something that, like I said, long transits. Pluto is
Yeah.
going to be in Aquarius for 21 years. So I think that will definitely, that will unfold at some point. It's just a
Mhm.
matter of when.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I'm just looking at the time. Okay. Let's move on to the transit of Neptune in Aries. Um, because what we had mentioned, was that the last time that this happened was in 1862, when, during the United States Civil War. Um, and Saturn will also be entering Aries at this time. They are going to be conjunct in the early degrees of Aries. So we have Neptune, which, this is our collective ideals, utopian visions, also illusions and deception, escape, escapism, and addiction. But I'm focused mainly on the ideals portion of it, and just, how
Mhm,
we see ourselves moving forward in society.
mhm.
While Neptune has been in Pisces, there has been a huge resurgence in spirituality, in any kind of divination, whether it be astrology or tarot or any kind of divinatory cards. And we've seen that happen on YouTube. For better or worse,
Right.
there's a lot of noise out there,
Yep.
but there has been a resurgence in spirituality, and Pisces rules spirituality. So when Neptune moves into Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, the pioneer, the one who is very active in pursuing what it wants, this energy is going to shift very much. I mean, the energy of Pisces versus Aries. Pisces is a water sign, it is very emotional. Aries is a fire sign. It can be very aggressive. So we saw this in 1862 with the Civil War, which eventually led to, in 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation, which ended slavery in the United States. So these new ideals coming into the country. This was also during the time of the British parliamentary reform, just to not be so United States centric,
Mhm.
which expanded the electorate and gave greater political power to the working class, which was at the time extraordinarily progressive. And then in 1861, Saturn made a harsh opposition to Neptune. Um, so this kind of brought about, or this was at the time focused on the ideals of the working class. And this is definitely a theme that we see like right now,
Mhm.
especially as Neptune gets to the later degrees of Pisces. So in 2025, Saturn will be conjunct Neptune, which is an interesting combination because Saturn restricts anything that it touches, and Neptune kind of expands. It's not quite as
Mhm.
expansive as Jupiter, but Neptune is the sea, it is water.
Right.
Um, and Saturn could bring structure and responsibility to this expansion. They could also kind of butt heads at times. Um, and when Saturn is in Aries, it is actually in its fall. It is in a sign that
Mhm.
it is not comfortable in. So I see these archetypes kind of in some ways working with each other, but in some ways also working against each other.
Well, that makes me think of the Supreme Court, where there is a divide. There you've got the what they call the originalists, right, on the one side, and then you've got the people who see the Constitution as a living, breathing, adaptable document. Um, we have never lost a right that was enshrined in the Constitution. Um, but with Roe being overturned, that's interesting that there was that shift. Um, I think that's the is
Yeah.
what do we do with the Constitution? Are and if you're an original, I mean, to be an originalist I mean, it's kind of stretches the imagination um, as to how they're defining that. I think the makeup of the court will probably change because people are getting older. Uh, I think to look at the Constitution is worth doing. Um,
Yes.
I can pull on that. So for that, we will have the letter card in Lenormand represent the Constitution, and we'll just look to see will there be some changes there.
I think that's a really great point of, Saturn the ideals, or I'm sorry, Neptune the ideals, and Saturn the restrictor. That
Right?
perfectly describes these battling forces.
Absolutely. And, it didn't doesn't say a perfect union. It says a more perfect union. Now, to my way of thinking, that's an argument against originalism because it's arguing no, no, more perfect means change, shift, growth, dynamism. Okay. So interesting, and I may pull clarifiers. So we have the young man, we have the bouquet, we have the letter, we have the mountain, and then we have the dog. I'm going to say that for the foreseeable future, there will be attempts made in this is I love this card. This is yang energy, but it's also young yang energy. I mean, look at how vulnerable his throat is because he sticks his neck out and he believes that all things are possible. So think about those words. How can we make this a more perfect union? This is this energy of believing that we can do this. That our Constitution really is a gift to us if we consider it to be a living, breathing document. Uh, Constitution, of course, is in the middle, but what are the last two cards? The mountain and the dog. listen, whatever happens with this election, 2025, that project 2025 will now become project 2028. Nobody's going anywhere. The dog is lawyers, right? So they will do all that they can to prevent uh, people from exercising the full gift that the Constitution's elasticity provides in the words more perfect union. They're going to try to block it at every turn, because it's not as though 45 will lose and then Alito and Thomas and Kavanaugh will say, okay, well, bye, we're done. That's not how it's going to happen. There will be those last gasp efforts. Now, the thing about a mountain is, and I tell people this all the time, this is not the end of the world. It's delay. It's absolutely delay, but it's not death. It's not death. This old status quo way of doing things, it took a long time to get where it is, and it's going to take at least as long to bring it back to what it was intended to be, an exercise towards a more perfect union. So, there are lawyers on both sides, though. I can mirror this yang energy with this dog. So there are just as many people who want it to be a living, breathing document as there are who want it, to put us back in hoop skirts and whatever. You know what I mean? But it will be a battle. I don't see in this, and certainly not in 2025. That's what we're looking at. I don't think there will be movement, but what I do think that the electorate will see is the battle, which is not a bad thing, right?
Mhm.
I mean, at least you can you can observe that and have the conversations on your own, and shifts will happen from the ground up, especially with the astrology being the way that it is. There will be a groundswell of opinion and support so that in time this mountain will be blasted, but not in 2025.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, luckily for us, the symbology of Saturn and Neptune, Saturn moves more quickly than Neptune. And so Neptune will be moving through this area a lot slower. And over time, more changes will unfold. Whereas Saturn will be ingressing into the next sign and not having that restrictive nature on, where Neptune is going, what it is doing. So I
I have
think,
a
like you said,
question for you.
Mhm.
So you said that, so we're, okay, now I'm going to probably mess up the terminology, but you'll fix it for me. We're moving from this watery Neptune place, right, to Aries. But I understand that we're moving, but part of the whole Neptune thing, as you said, was this rise in spirituality, and so do when we move, do we not take anything with us into the next place?
No, not at all. I do think that there are ebbs and flows with these sorts of
Mhm.
movements. But it's like when, for example, you think about the industrial revolution that happened. When the industrial revolution ended, we still had all of the all of the
Yeah,
technology was still there, and we still moved forward with it. Was there as much forward movement, after Pluto exited Aquarius? There was a period of time where those sorts of innovations kind of slowed down a bit. But
mhm,
some people are predicting like the end of astrology, the end of I'm like, astrology's been around for like thousands
forever,
of years.
right, forever.
I'm not worried.
We
Um,
take that tool set into this next placement that we find ourselves in, you
yes,
know?
and I also think that there's going to be like a little bit of a different framing around it. A lot of the woo woo astrology, which you could call either one of us woo woo. It's not a
Fedora.
science.
Mhm.
Um, but it is an art. There is a system to it, and I think that some of the other transits might bring about a legitimacy to that. For instance, there was a college, Kepler College, that was looking to be accredited. You know about Kepler College, yeah,
Yes.
and that didn't happen for them. But with Pluto exiting Capricorn, moving into Aquarius, that puts less power. Pluto is power to the top-down hierarchical structures, more power to
Yes.
people. And so, perhaps things like this might be more recognized, legitimized.
Well,
Who knows?
I always say that people want to think that there is a chasm between science or physics, we'll call it, and metaphysics. But in fact, they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, everything is everything.
That's right. And so it seems to me, moving into Aquarius, if Aquarius is the people, that there will be even more. That's why I asked, could you, or does this energy like go with us? Because, think about religion and top down religion and I don't know, the abuse scandals of for example, the Catholic Church um, and people being sort of disillusioned by all of that and people wanting to have their own way to access spirit, we'll call it. And that I mean, I think of myself, I'm like a gateway. In other words, I can show you how to do what I do, and I can show you in real time how that works. But my goal is for you to say, well, let me try that. Let me see if I can figure this out. And that seems very Aquarian to me, is that the people are doing this sort of thing that's requires some cerebral, learning, but that's not inaccessible. And I mean, I don't know. I just feel like I feel the echoes of what was sort of coming into what will be, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with, we will rely less on institutions,
Right.
whatever that might be.
Right.
Whether
Whatever.
it is the government or whoever says, "Oh, this is a education that we recognize." For instance, with like Kepler College versus an accredited university, or just like the institution uh, of thought in general and being able to do things for yourself or your community. That is definitely
Speaking of
symbolism of Pluto and Aquarius for
Well,
sure.
speaking of education, I believe that there will be lots of institutions that fall. You could argue that that would be even part of what we could call civil war in some ways. For example, the public school system, which I was a part of for 30 years, and I think that I, I mean, even at its best, it's not wonderful, and it's built on a very old model that is more about control and indoctrination, and we see that uh, in our electorate now, right? Where's the thought,
Mhm.
the critical thinking? I don't think critical thinking is necessarily encouraged in the way that we educate people in the public school system. But even the workplace, look how resistant people have been to going back to work after COVID. They're like, wait, I can be even more productive if I don't have a commute, if I don't have to be around the water cooler, if I don't have to deal with politics, office politics, if I can just do my job. But you hear the status quo saying, no, you have to come back to work. Why? Because they want to see with their eyeballs that you're on task. They want to control. I think that will fall away as well. You talked about crypto and the
Mhm.
whole banking institution. I think that the way we do money will be blown
Yes.
up and upended. And you could argue that all of this is civil war in the sense that it undoes what was in favor of something new and different, you know?
Yes, no, I totally agree, and I think that, monetary systems, I mean, we're already seeing it, like I had mentioned earlier, with BRICS, and we've been seeing it happen as, Uranus moves through Taurus, and Taurus
Mhm.
rules currency,
Right.
and so when, Uranus enters into Gemini, which more rules over in relation to currency, it's like the exchange, but also like intellectually, like what we think of money as. I can give you $5 for a carton of eggs, but what does that $5 really represent? And what is the value in, I think that the value of what we do is going to be reassessed as well.
Yes.
and like
Yes.
how we exchange based on that. And I know that's like a very foreign concept to a lot of people who, capitalism is just ingrained in our brains. A carton of eggs costs $5, versus,
But
community
bartering, which is a very
bartering.
old system, is something that I think there'll be a resurgence of. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're already kind of seeing that with, like, small communities,
Yeah.
with, like, mutual aid and that sort of stuff, and I think, crypto is, whether, some leftists want to agree or not, crypto is one of the ways that, small communities have been able to, reach, for instance, people who are experiencing, war,
Mhm.
over in Ukraine or in Gaza. I know that specifically a lot of, there are no banks open in Gaza, but people have cell phones and you can have a crypto wallet on your cell phone. And so some people are surviving literally by accepting crypto donations. So, and that's a very extreme example.
Mhm.
However, if you think of like, how powerful that technology is, how it could be implemented in a under an oppressive capitalist system to subvert some of the ways that we are oppressed by the US dollar. And I know
Right.
that's very philosophically politically out there, but I think it's something that people might take into consideration as the US dollar weakens and different things happen in the economy.
Absolutely.
um okay, so we've been recording for about an hour. Let's get to this final transit. I don't want to keep you for too long. But I'm in very much enjoying this conversation.
Me too.
So sorry, the sun is hitting me. It's like right
I
in my
see that, yeah.
okay, that's much better.
Okay.
Okay. So, the final transit that I wanted to talk about was Pluto's ingress into Aquarius. Now, had a little preview of this. I believe it was this past summer. It was very brief. Pluto ingressed into Aquarius and then it retrograded back into Capricorn. Currently, as we are recording this video, it is in Capricorn at 29 degrees, the critical degree, which could perhaps explain a lot of the tension in the air. A
Mhm.
lot of the tension in the air right now could be attributed to perhaps all of these planets being in the final degrees of their sign. But the last time that Pluto was in Aquarius was in 1778 during the Revolutionary War.
Mhm.
Again, another war.
Yeah.
I don't want to freak out any of the listeners. They hear, all these wars being brought up. Like I said, war means something very different today. The symbolism of war, and I'm going to do an entire episode on this. But war means doesn't just mean a physical battle being fought. It means a clash in ideologies.
Right.
So, and Pluto represents transformation, destruction, and rebirth. Aquarius is all about community, the future, and the decentralization of power, specifically when we are going from Capricorn to Aquarius. Capricorn, as we were talking about before, is very top down, hierarchical structures, patriarchy. And Aquarius is decentralization, it is community. So during this time, in 1776, this was the Declaration of Independence, the birth of the US Constitution in 1787, the French Revolution in 1789, and the storming of the Bastille, the Haitian Revolution in 1791, which was the world's most successful slave revolt. And it was leading the eventual independence of Haiti in 1804, which I could do a whole episode on the astrology of Haiti and the French Revolution. That's for another day. The rise of the abolitionist movement in the United States, such as Vermont and Pennsylvania, and this was kind of the beginning, sort of stirring of the Civil War, which would eventually happen again when Neptune would move into Aries. And we had some foreshadowing, like I had mentioned before, in 2020 with Saturn and Jupiter both conjunct in Aquarius. And at this time, it was during the pandemic, and people were upset for a lot of reasons. But this was the spark of the Black Lives Matter movement. This was when all of the protests happened, and there were several articles written about this prior to that just completely foreshadowed articles by astrologers who were
Mhm.
talking about this. And people are talking about the movement of Pluto in Aquarius. I feel like a lot of the articles in 2020 were much more indicative of social change. And although a lot of astrologers are talking about Pluto moving into Aquarius, I truly don't believe that no one understands how explosive, how big this ingress is going to be. This is the final ingress. And in June 2025, the second Saturn Jupiter square will happen at the same time that Pluto is moving through this area, when it is going to be sitting at that same degree that Saturn and Jupiter conjoined. And the reason that this is significant is because it is echoing what happened in 2020. It is sitting at the same degree. And this angle between the two planets that were involved is going to be exact. So, June 2025 is going to be kind of an echo of what happened in 2020 over the summer. So, all while Pluto is moving through Aquarius, this is when it is going to be making angles to Uranus and Neptune. So, this is what I was talking about in my previous videos, at the beginning of this video, with this grand minor trine. And this is going to be active for several years. This is not just one moment. It is, I believe, going to be active at least to the exact degree. The planets will retrograde and they'll make this grand minor trine several times up until 2027.
Mhm.
So this is kind of tying it all together. The Pluto ingress is the biggest one of them all. Um, and the themes, again, this is kind of reiterating what we were talking about before, are changes in structure to the US government, collective empowerment, unionization, rebellion of oppressed peoples, industrialization, because Aquarius does also rule technology, um, as well as the internet. So, major leaps in technology, and again, blockchain technology. So, that is a huge way to like a lot of different topics to tie in. The other thing I wanted to mention was, at this time, the United States is also going to be experiencing its Chiron return. And Chiron is the wounded healer.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, I was sort of thinking back to 2020 and all of the unrest and and how what seemed to, just in my own observation, what seemed to result from things like the George Floyd incident was people really had a come to Jesus, we'll call it, moment. So, for example, I had people from different walks of my life contacting me. So in some cases, I was the only Black person that they knew. And they wanted to talk about what had happened and how horrified they were. They maybe wanted to do some mea culpaing about whatever they had done or not done around the issues of race in the past. And I thought to myself, well, this is novel. This is great. But I also had the feeling that it would not last. And it did not last, in fact, because that kind of introspection, both on a personal level and writ large in the zeitgeist, is really hard to sustain, right? And I think that there was a backlash, right? All of those people who said what they said, all of a sudden now they're not saying that anymore. But I think that when I think of it astrologically, I know that things are not, nothing returns exactly, but there are cyclical things that happen. And I feel like what happened in 2020 could perhaps have been, and maybe I'm putting too positive a spin on it, but a rehearsal for how it can be done better this next time, right?
Yes,
So,
no, I totally that is very much kind of what I see in the chart is like that Saturn Jupiter conjunction that was very much a rehearsal. And if we look at prior, the Black Lives Matter movement has been around for a while. I remember with when there were protests for Trayvon Martin,
right.
and it was the same sort of thing where, people, people cared for a period of time and there were protests. And then, people went back to their lives. And that was
Right.
the other thing about 2020 was people weren't going back to their lives for a long time because of the pandemic.
Exactly, that's exactly right. Well,
Yes.
when I talk about race as being America's original wound, original sin, when I hear the name Chiron, ding, 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 bells go off, right?
Yeah.
Now, the thing about Chiron, as I understand it, is that if this is our original wound, the fact that we engaged in the behavior in the first place, that's bad enough. But then the fact that there was never any truth and reconciliation as a result in the way that there has been in South Africa or at Nuremberg or we just said, you know what? I mean, I think Abraham Lincoln made a big mistake. Great guy, but he made a big mistake. And he said, no, let's just welcome our brothers back and let's not hold them accountable. Well, that then led to things like the rise of Jim Crow. The fact that people think having weddings at plantations is like a cool thing to do, you know, when the ground is soaked with the blood of the slaves. So, um, the thing about Chiron is that it's a wound that never heals. But so in anybody's chart, right, wherever that wound is, you can never heal it for yourself, but you can heal it for other people. So in the context of a nation's original sin, that original sin is always going to have been there. The wound of that will always be there. But perhaps we can learn to move from that wounded place. I don't mean away from, I mean, have that be the ground from which we move and make decisions and see other people. Do you see? So we don't say things like, "Oh, we're in a post-racial society," or "I don't see color," or whatever it is, but that we say, "No, we are in this wound. We feel it. We understand our participation in it. We understand the ways that we benefited from it. We move from that place. That's where healing begins for a culture." And I think that this next transit that you're talking about presents us with that opportunity on a platter. Whether we take it or not, that's a whole nother story.
Yes, 100%. And what I always say when I'm reading someone's chart, whether, Chiron is very prominent in the chart or, whatever is happening with Chiron, you can use that wound as you can let it fester or you can use it as a source of strength.
Exactly.
And personally, I think about, I've struggled with chronic illness for the last, geez, like 10 years.
Mhm.
And only until recently was I able to uh, accept it and, accept the fact that I am wounded and also confront that and in a healthy way. And that's really how I see. I mean,
Exactly.
I don't know, we can't predict how in the United States we will react to this. I think it has to do with a lot of the other transits that are going on. And I've looked at the chart in Sinistry, and some things are very clear cut and some things are not. But will we use this transit to understand our identity as a nation? Will we let the wound fester, or will we build a
As we
foundation?
have done, right, as we have done, or take this opportunity to say, "This is who we are, and we will never turn away from that or ignore it or act like it didn't happen, but look who we are trying to become."
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
I would love to if you can pull some cards for this.
okay. So, I'm gonna use you know what? I'll use the whip because, nobody likes a whip. And it is reminiscent of slavery. So I will use the whip as the symbol for our original wound. And we're looking at 2025. So what kind of movement will we see or not see in 2025 around this chironic original wound of the United States? Okay. Which is slavery and racism, which is the aftermath, of course, of slavery. Okay, So we're looking for the whip. Will there be forward movement, backward movement, any kind of movement um, around this issue? So there it is. That's our original wound. Okay, and I'm just going to pull a few clarifiers. Okay. All right. So, and this is our last issue that we're talking about, transit. So I think it'll be a good thing to end with. So the cards that I pulled are the ship, the mice, the whip, the older man, and the garden. And then I pulled clarifiers, but let's talk about these first. So yeah, we have this opportunity to move forward. Again, from that place of recognizing the woundedness and from that place of recognizing that we have an opportunity to decide, just as you said, do we want it to fester? Because how's that been working out? or do we want it to be the springboard for growth? I mirror it with the last card in the original line of five, which is the garden. And this is people. This is the population. This is the electorate. This is all of us. All of us really at bottom would love to move. Nobody wants to be wounded. Let me just put it that way, right? Nobody wants to deal with the peroxide and the dermabrasion or whatever that needs to go on in order for that healing to happen, right? But everybody wants to move to a better place. And but people are scared. They're nervous. Like, if I acknowledge that this is a thing, or that the systemic racism of this is a thing, how will I be disadvantaged? Will be something that a lot of people will ask. What does it mean to be white? Like, white is sort of the default. It's the wall. That I judge everything up against the wall. But then, what is the wall? What is it? Who am I? What am I? Which is what the white power movement. It comes from that angsty place. Like, how do I identify? What does it mean to be white? What is my culture? Because so this is really anxiety, and that's sort of the old school way of thinking about this. Uh, if we have an equitable distribution of things, for example, how will that disadvantage me? Because it's got to come from somewhere, and I don't think it's fair because I didn't hold slaves, so why would I? That whole thing. So it's this anxiety and this worry that is not just among old people. I mean, you've got the Proud Boys; they're not old. So this thing does get passed down. It's not a question of that generation will die out and will be better, because we used to think that in the '60s, and that did not happen. Right. So, okay, the whip is in the middle, garden is at the end of the line. Now, I drew some clarifiers on a couple of the cards. So here's this old way of thinking. But look, we have the stork, we have the ring, and we have the tower. So this is telling me that as a nation, we need to make a decision. Do you want to be healed? Do we want to be healed? The stork is about positive change. If so, we can pay lip service to it like people did in 2020 when they would call me up and want to do the mea culpa thing. But the thing is, it takes commitment. This is why I was so moved by the White Women for Harris call, that millions and millions of women that came out on that call, because I mean, they addressed their own interaction with racism, their own participation in that. And hopefully those will be messages that echo and resonate, and that once this election is over and done, we still see that there's work to do. This is about staying committed. And then, this is about being strong as opposed to being timid about it. The tower in Lenormand is very different from the tower in Tarot, which is falling apart, burning, people are coming flying out of it, whatever. This is a stalwart structure. If we want to be a light for the world, if we want to be true to this idea of American exceptionalism, well, then we have to walk the walk of our talk. And this is saying that this is about, this is in a health reading, this is the spine. And I have a lot of titanium in my spine, so I always resonate with this card. But it's about stealing, pardon the pun, our spines to the doing of this work, to the committing of to be a better, more perfect union. And then I pulled cards on the garden because the garden is the people, and I have the scales, the moon, and the bear. I like these. This is the extra card that I added to the Lenormand system. What I wanted to make sure is that I had a scale that was balanced, but that I had heavy coins on the one side and I had daisies on the other. What do we value and why in any given moment? Right? How committed are we to the healing of this country? Not just for our sakes, but for our children's sakes, and also for the sake of the world. Everybody's looking at this grand experiment. We're a very young country. Are we going to be, just one and done and that's it? So this is about just weighing the odds of what will happen if we don't do this, and then weighing up the benefits that could accrue to us if we do this work. And then we have the moon. Again, the moon is about identity. Who is it that we want to be? Who do we say we are, and whom do we want to be? And what do we have to do to get from what we say to who we want to be? And then the bear I actually like because this is a card of a lot of power. Um, I can mirror it with the ship, which is our moving forward. I do think there will be progress on this front. Again, not linear and in some ways, invisible, but I absolutely think there will be progress on this front. I think, the zeitgeist gets affected by lots of things, and the things are subtle a lot of times, right? But I just think having closing the door on certain people and having new people come in every time they stand up and speak for the United States. It's a healing thing, and it's a showing us of what is possible if we commit to the cause, if we commit to being who we say we are.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, and I wonder, with this movement, I feel like the BLM movement kind of sparked a lot of other social movements and
Yes,
sparked questions about like intersectionality, which
that's
you
right.
sort of talked about with the White Women for Harris movement. And I'm interested to see specifically, because we have all of these issues that people are concerned with that are all very deeply connected. Systemic racism is directly related to and somebody who is living in Kentucky, a white person who is living in Kentucky and who is oppressed by the system of capitalism doesn't necessarily understand why these other institutions and these other systemic issues affect them as well.
Right.
So I guess my question is, and perhaps you sort of like, it showed with like the tower, that like, are we going to be able to come together on these issues and tackle them, once and for all? Because, when we look at the issue of, the original wound, every issue is tied into that. It has to do with the oppressor, with this patriarchal system, this white male patriarchal
Right.
system that oppresses all of us. And so, the division that we're seeing in our country now, um, we are not all able to see eye to eye on that. So I guess my question would be, will that tower stand? Will everyone
Well,
be able to come?
in 2025, it will stand, yes. In 2025, will it be solved? No. We take 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, and I think we always will. Um, but I also think that there will be these simultaneous, sort of deconstruction of other entities and ways of doing things that will all help send the message that there is a better way. You know, will it require a civil war? I mean, I do think that one thing it's very important to do, and I've said this on my Substack and I've said this on my channel, is that um, you know the old order. So if you get what I'm saying, is going to pass away. It will end. It will, and people are going to be left holding the bag and saying, "Well, wait, what?" Right, and that could cause resentments to fester or something different. And I think that for those of us who are over here watching all of this, it's really incumbent upon us to welcome people into, you know, the family of what uh, of the stork, wanting to do better, to improve things, to not say, "Well, what did I tell you?" I mean, how could you not see? How could you not know? You were sister. No, we can't do that. We all, we make mistakes, and we make wrong choices. I hate the word mistake because a lot of times mistakes are not really mistakes. But anyway, we make wrong choices. We have to have the grace to allow those people who made wrong choices to make better ones, right? And I think that that might be what 2025 is about. I mean, um, and I think it will start at the top. Speaking of top down, it will start with what kind of inaugural address we hear. You know, and I suspect it'll be one that says not anything about American carnage. You recall that one, but more about whether you voted for me or whether you didn't vote for me. I work for you, and I care about you, and my interests are what yours are. Um, and I think that if we can model that behavior in our regular lives, and have that's the kind of trickle down, not the Reagan kind that didn't work, but that's the kind of trickle down message that I think could soothe the savage beast, make people forgive themselves for wrong choices, and we can be who we say we are. Will it all happen in 2025? Nope. Can we start it? Yes. And the thing about this, what I'm saying is the same thing that astrology said. Astrology shows you trajectories and likelihoods, but you have choice in the matter. And there are things you can do. You can live up to the highest part of this particular sign, right? Or the lowest part of the sign. That's your choice. We just, I think, have to have a fertile and receptive ground for people who want to choose the higher place.
Yes, and I do think, I mean, this kind of ties it all back with that, that trine between all of these transits is that we will have Pluto and Aquarius. We will have this movement happening. There will be a focus on community. We will have Uranus and Gemini, new ways of communicating with each other, and Neptune in Aries, new ideas. So, while all of it will be very turbulent, there is potential and there is opportunity to come together. And the trine is a harmonious aspect. So, although the beginning of these transits, I mean, for the next 2 years, like I said.
Yeah,
It's going to be, I mean, beyond that, as well. It will
yeah.
be turbulent at times, but there is an opportunity for people to come together and to agree on these things, which is exciting.
It's very exciting. I'm very excited for the future.
Me too. I'm a little bit anxious, but I am mostly excited, and anxiety is, just another form of excitement.
Well, I was gonna say it's like stage fright. If you didn't feel
Yep.
stage fright, you go out there and you do a crappy performance. So it's good to be a little bit revved up. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks.
And can you
Great.
tell the audience where they can find you?
Yeah, I'm in the company of cards on Substack and also on YouTube, and my book is available everywhere. The Language of Lenormand. The deck that I used is called Erika's Lenormand of Hope. If you go to my YouTube, there's the More button, and you can just click that, and it will tell you where to go. But yeah, that's mostly where I am is YouTube and Substack these days.
Great. Yes, and I will put a link for Erica's channel in the description below. And also, I was looking at your website, and the cards that you did you design those yourself?
I worked
The
with an
artwork.
artist. I work with an artist, and I had the vision, and she brought it to life, and I'm thrilled with the way that they've turned out. I've never seen a black Lenormand before. I mean, black Lenormand. There's only a couple of people in the deck, period, in any Lenormand deck. But I wanted to have some representation, so I'm thrilled with that. And I wanted a deck that was lyrical and serious and deep. And I think that's what I got.
Yeah, and the imagery and the artistry on the cards is just gorgeous. I
Yes. Oh,
definitely
the
want to.
artist, her name is Erika with a C. Mine's with a K, but her name is also Erika. Kind of like how you and I dressed in the same color. Who knew? But Erika Pebus, Peebus, and she's a wonderful artist, and it was a wonderful collaboration with La Panthère Studio. And I just every time I use the deck, I'm saying, oh my God, this is the idea that thoughts become things. This is an example of that. It was a thought in my mind, and it became a thing, and it's a healing tool. I'm delighted with it.
Yes, well, it turned out beautifully. I can't wait to get my hands on a deck of those cards.
They're great.
Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to collaborating at some point in the future. Hopefully, we'll be able to look back and see how these transits unfolded and what we predicted would happen.
I'd love to have you on my channel in the new year. I think that would be great.
Of course, I would love to.
Okay, terrific.